The phone buzzed twice in her palm, and Amara Chukwu didn't even glance at the number before she hit send. 6 photos. Her body wrapped in red silk, candlelight catching her skin, a message meant for one man only, the man she had been seeing in secret for 3 months. She was smiling when she pressed the button. She was still smiling when the delivery confirmation blinked on the screen. It wasn't until she looked up from her phone, until she read the name at the top of the thread, that the smile fell off her face like something had reached into her chest and yanked it out. Wrong number. Not by 1 digit. Not by 2. She had saved a new contact that morning under the wrong name, her hands shaking from an argument with her sister, and now those 6 photographs, the most intimate images she had ever taken of herself, were sitting in the inbox of a stranger 3,000 miles away in Seoul, South Korea. A stranger whose name she didn't even know. A stranger who, at that very moment, sat motionless in a wheelchair in a penthouse overlooking the Han River, staring at his phone with an expression that hadn't moved in over a year. His name was Kang Taemin, and he had not felt anything, not rage, not sorrow, not even the dull static of boredom, since the night 18 months ago when a bullet meant for his heart had lodged instead in his spine. He was 34 years old, the reigning head of one of the most feared syndicates in East Asia, and he had not walked, had not felt his own legs, had not touched another human being with anything but suspicion in 547 days. His men whispered that the boss had died the night of the shooting, that only his body had survived. So when his phone buzzed on the marble side table beside him and he lifted it with the same mechanical indifference he lifted everything now, he expected another report. Another betrayal to punish. Another problem to solve from behind glass. He did not expect a woman he had never met in a country he had never visited looking at him, no, looking at the phone not knowing it was him, like he was the only man alive worth undressing for. He sat very still. And for the first time in 547 days, something in Kang Taemin's chest moved. If this story already has your heart racing, comment "I'm still watching right now" so we know who's here till the very end. And if you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell because where this story is going, you will not want to miss a single moment of it. 3 weeks earlier, Amara's life had looked nothing like a woman on the edge of a storm. She was 29 years old, a nurse at a community hospital in Houston, Texas, the kind of woman who brought soup to sick neighbors and remembered the names of every patient's grandchildren. She had grown up the daughter of Nigerian immigrants, raised on her mother's proverbs and her father's stubborn insistence that hard work outlasted luck. She believed in that. She had built her whole life on that belief. Nursing school paid for in double shifts, a modest apartment she was proud of, a heart she had learned, painfully, to guard. The guarding had started 2 years earlier, when a man she loved had left her 3 days before their wedding, taking with him not just her trust but the down payment on their shared future. Since then, Amara had built walls around herself so high that even her sister Ngozi joked she needed a passport to get past them. But walls, as it turned out, were not the same as peace. Beneath the careful schedule, the church on Sundays, the perfectly organized apartment, Amara was lonely in a way she had stopped admitting even to herself. That loneliness was why, 3 months before the photo incident, she had let herself fall, slowly, cautiously, then all at once, for a man named Marcus, a charming contractor she'd met at her cousin's engagement party. He had been patient with her walls. He had said the right things. And on the night everything changed, she had taken those photographs for him, wanting, for once in 2 long years, to feel wanted without apology. She did not know yet that Marcus had already grown tired of her caution, that he had already started seeing someone else, that the very night she sent those photos to the wrong number, he was 3 states away doing exactly what she feared most. She did not know any of it. All she knew, staring at her phone in her dim apartment, was that 6 pictures meant for a man who no longer deserved them had just landed in the hands of someone else entirely. She sat on the edge of her bed for a long time. She told herself it didn't matter. Some random number in another country, some stranger who would see the pictures, feel confused, maybe delete them and forget. People got wrong numbers every day. This was nothing. This would be nothing. She had no way of knowing that thousands of miles away, a man who ran an empire built on fear had just told his head of security, in a voice that hadn't held urgency in over a year, to find out exactly who she was. Kang Tae-min had built his life before the bullet on control. Every variable accounted for. Every threat neutralized before it became a threat at all. He had inherited the organization from his father at 26, a boy thrust into a war he hadn't started, and within 4 years he had turned enemies into allies and allies into instruments, until his name alone was enough to end negotiations before they began. He was, by every account that mattered in his world, untouchable. Until the night his own cousin, hungry for the throne, had put a bullet in his back at close range and left him to die on the floor of his father's old study. He had not died. He had survived against every prediction his doctors made, but survival had come at a cost that felt, some nights, crueler than death. The bullet had severed something in his spine that no surgeon in Seoul, Tokyo, or Zurich could repair. He had spent the first 6 months in a rage so total it frightened even his most loyal men. He had spent the next year in a silence that frightened them more. He ruled now from a penthouse he rarely left, giving orders through men who reported to him with their eyes lowered, terrified not of his anger but of the emptiness that had replaced it. He did not trust easily before the shooting. He trusted no one now. His cousin was dead, that debt had been paid within weeks, but the paranoia the betrayal planted in him had metastasized into something that touched every relationship he had left. Women had come, of course. Women always came for men like him, wheelchair or not, empire or not. He had turned every one of them away before they finished their first sentence. He assumed, correctly most of the time, that they wanted his money, his name, or the strange thrill of being close to a man everyone whispered about in dangerous tones. So when 6 photographs of a woman he had never met appeared on his phone, sent by mistake to a number meant for someone else entirely, his first instinct, the old, sharp, suspicious instinct that had kept him alive his whole life, was to assume a trap. Someone testing his defenses. Someone trying to get close. He had his head of security, a quiet, efficient man named Do-yoon, trace the number within the hour. Her name was Amara Chukwu, 29. A nurse in Houston. No criminal record, no connections to any syndicate, no history that intersected his world in any way that made sense. Just a woman who had made a mistake meant for a man named Marcus Webb, sending something private to a wrong number in a moment of hope she would later regret. Tae-min stared at the report for a long time. Then he did something he had not done in 547 days. He asked to see her face. Amara tried to forget about it. For nearly 2 weeks, she almost succeeded. She deleted the outgoing message thread, blocked the unfamiliar number out of embarrassment more than fear, and told herself the whole incident was a strange, cringing footnote in an otherwise unremarkable month. She did not know that the number she blocked belonged to a man who did not accept being blocked by anyone, not even by accident, not even by a woman who meant nothing to his empire and everything suddenly to something in him he could not name. She did not know that 4 days after she blocked him, a black car with tinted windows had begun appearing, briefly and without explanation, on the street outside her apartment building, driven by a man who reported everything back to Seoul. Her schedule, her hospital shifts, the coffee shop she visited on Tuesday mornings, the sister who came to check on her every other weekend. She did not know that Kang Tae-min, a man who had not left his own penthouse in over a year, who conducted every meeting through a screen and every threat through an intermediary, had begun making calls he had not made in 18 months, calls to a private aviation company, calls to a physical therapist he had dismissed a year earlier in a fit of despair, calls that suggested, for the first time since the bullet took his legs, that he wanted to move again. Not just his body. His life. She found out about Marcus first. That was the part that broke her, weeks before anything else did. She had gone to his apartment on a rare day off, wanting to talk about the wedding invitations his mother kept asking about, wanting some scrap of the future she had let herself imagine again. She found him with someone else, a woman laughing in his kitchen, wearing one of his shirts, entirely at home in the life Amara thought she had been slowly building with him. He did not even have the decency to look ashamed. He told her, with the practiced ease of a man who had said this kind of thing before, that he needed someone with less baggage. Someone easier. Amara did not cry in front of him. She had learned, over 2 years of guarding her heart, exactly how to hold her face together until she was alone. But in the parking lot outside his building, sitting in her car with her hands white-knuckled on the wheel, she let herself break in a way she had not allowed since the wedding that never happened. She did not know that 7,000 miles away, a man who had been watching her life unfold through the careful, distant reports of his head of security felt something twist in his chest at the news. Something that, in a healthier man, might have been called protectiveness, and in Kang Tae-min, after everything, felt disturbingly close to purpose. The knock came on a Thursday night in late October, 9 weeks after the photos were sent, 6 weeks after she had stopped thinking about the wrong number at all. Amara was in sweatpants, hair wrapped, reheating leftover jollof rice when she heard it, 3 even knocks, deliberate, unhurried. She assumed it was her sister, who had a habit of showing unannounced with wine and unsolicited opinions about Marcus. She opened the door already halfway through a sentence about how she did not want to talk about him tonight. The sentence died in her throat. A man sat in a wheelchair on her doorstep. Not an old man, not a frail one. A man perhaps in his mid-30s with sharp, striking features, dark hair, and eyes that studied her with an intensity that made the hallway feel suddenly too small. He wore a black coat that looked as though it cost more than her monthly rent, and behind him, at a respectful distance, stood 2 men in suits who did not look like they belonged on her modest street in Houston at all. "Ms. Chukwu," he said in accented but precise English, his voice low and careful, as though he had rehearsed this moment more times than he wanted to admit. "My name is Kang Tae-min. I believe you sent something to me by mistake some weeks ago." Amara's stomach dropped through the floor. Every drop of blood in her body seemed to rush to her face at once. I'm sorry, I don't. How did you find where I have spent a great deal of money finding out," he said. And there was something almost self-mocking in the way he said it, an honesty she had not expected from a stranger who looked like he belonged in a different world entirely. "I did not come here to embarrass you. I came because I have not been able to stop thinking about you, and I find that troubling because I do not think about anyone. Not anymore." "You should leave," Amara said, though her voice shook on the words, though some traitorous part of her did not want him to. I don't even know you. You can't just show up at my door because of a mistake I made." "You're right," Taemin said quietly. "I can't. But I did anyway because for the first time in a very long time, I wanted something enough to do something I know I shouldn't." Neither of them moved for a long moment. Behind him, the city noise of her street hummed on, oblivious, while in the doorway of a modest apartment in Houston, a Nigerian-American nurse and a paralyzed Korean crime boss stood staring at each other like 2 people who had each, in their own private ways, stopped believing anyone would ever look at them and want to stay. If your heart is pounding right now the way Amara's was standing in that doorway, don't go anywhere because what happens between these 2 over the next several weeks will change both of their lives forever. And if you want to see it unfold, make sure you've hit subscribe because we are just getting started. She should have shut the door. She told herself that 100 times over the following days. She should have shut the door, called the police, blocked every number he could possibly reach her through. Instead, against every ounce of the caution she had built her life on, Amara had invited him inside that first night, if only to hear from his own mouth how a stranger from South Korea had ended up on her doorstep in Texas holding 6 photographs he had never asked for and could not, he admitted, quite bring himself to delete. He told her some of the truth that night. Not all of it, not yet, not the syndicate, not the empire, not the blood that stained the foundation of everything he owned, but enough. He told her he had been shot. He told her he had not walked in over a year. He told her, in a voice stripped of the polish that usually armored men like him, that in the 18 months since the bullet took his legs, He had stopped believing he was capable of feeling anything at all, until a stranger's photograph, sent to the wrong number in a moment of hope not meant for him, had cracked something open in his chest he thought had died with his old life. Amara did not know what to do with a confession like that. She had spent 2 years protecting herself from men who said too little. She did not have a defense prepared for a man who, for reasons she could not explain, said too much too honestly on a Thursday night in her cramped Houston apartment. "I don't know what you want from me," she told him finally, arms crossed, standing several careful feet away from his wheelchair. "Neither do I," he admitted. "I only know I want to find out." He left that night without asking for anything. No number, no promise, no photograph returned or deleted. He simply told her before his men wheeled him back to the car that he would be in Houston for 2 more weeks, staying at a hotel downtown, and that if she never wanted to see him again, he would respect that and disappear from her life as completely as the mistake that had brought him into it. She told herself she would never call. She called 4 days later. What followed was not the storybook courtship either of them expected. It was careful, halting, full of the particular awkwardness of 2 people who had each been broken in different corners of the world by different kinds of betrayal. They met for coffee, his security detail hovering at a distance that made every barista in the shop visibly nervous, and talked for 3 hours about nothing important and everything that mattered. He asked about her patience. She asked, hesitantly, about the wheelchair, and he answered honestly, without the flinch she expected, telling her about the cousin who had shot him, about the year of rage that followed, about the physical therapist he had fired out of despair and 2 weeks ago quietly rehired. She did not ask, yet, about the empire. She sensed there was more beneath his careful English and his expensive coat that he was not telling her, and some old, wary part of her, the part that had learned the hard way what happened when she trusted too quickly, kept a door in her heart firmly locked. But the walls came down slowly anyway, the way water eventually wears through stone. He learned that she hummed old Fela Kuti songs while she cooked. She learned that he had once, before the bullet, loved to run along the Han River at dawn, and that some nights he still dreamed of running, only to wake and remember. He learned about her father's proverbs. She learned that beneath the ice that had settled over him since the shooting, there was a man who had once, a long time ago, been capable of laughter. Real laughter, not the practiced kind he performed for his men. By the time his 2 weeks in Houston stretched into 4, Amara knew 2 things with equal certainty. She was falling for a man she had met by pure accident, and that man was not entirely who he claimed to be. The truth came apart the way these things always do, not gently but all at once, in a moment neither of them controlled. She had gone to meet him for dinner at his hotel, only to find the lobby crawling with police, hotel security whispering in tight, frightened clusters, and at the center of it, Taemin's own men in a standoff so tense the air itself seemed to hold its breath. A rival faction, emboldened by rumors that the great Kang Taemin was now a broken man in a wheelchair, had sent someone to finish what his cousin started 18 months earlier. The attempt failed. Dun's men were faster, more prepared, and the would-be assassin was subdued before he got within 30 feet of the penthouse suite. But the truth Amara had suspected and refused to fully look at was now impossible to ignore. She found Taemin afterward, shaken but unhurt, his composure a thin, brittle thing stretched over something close to panic. Not for himself, she realized with a jolt, but for her, for the danger her mere presence beside him might now represent. "You should have told me," she said, her voice trembling with an anger that had fear tangled somewhere inside it. "You let me fall for a stranger. You let me believe. I let you believe I could be a man again," he said, and there was no defense in his voice, only exhaustion. For the first time in a year and a half, someone looked at me and did not see a target or a wheelchair or a name people whisper in fear. I was selfish. I should have told you everything from the beginning. I am telling you now, Amara, I run an organization that has more enemies than I can count, and every one of them would use you against me in a heartbeat if they knew what you meant to me. "What do I mean to you?" she asked, and the question hung between them, raw and unguarded, the first time either of them had said it plainly. He looked at her for a long moment, his jaw tight, his hands gripping the arms of his wheelchair as though bracing against something. "Everything," he said finally. "You mean everything. And that terrifies me more than any bullet ever has." This is the moment that changes everything. And if this story has grabbed hold of you the way it's grabbed hold of everyone else watching right now, drop a like on this video before we go any further, because trust me, you have not seen the twist that's coming. Amara left Houston that week without telling him where she went. It was not cruelty. It was survival. The same instinct that had once made her guard her heart against a man who left her 3 days before her wedding now screamed at her to run from a man whose world had assassins standing in hotel lobbies. She flew to her aunt's house in Atlanta, told no one but her sister where she was, and spent 4 days trying to convince herself that walking away from Kang Taemin was the responsible thing, the safe thing, the thing her father's proverbs would have counseled. But proverbs, she was discovering, had little to say about a man who called her every night for 4 days straight, not to beg, not to pressure, but simply to ask how her shift went, whether she'd eaten, whether the Atlanta humidity was as unbearable as she complained it was. He never once asked her to come back. He never once told her she was wrong to be afraid. He simply stayed present, patient, honest, in a way no man in her life ever had been, until on the 5th night, sitting on her aunt's back porch with the phone pressed to her ear, Amara found herself crying not from fear but from the terrifying, overwhelming relief of being loved by someone who did not flinch from her walls but waited quietly for her to lower them herself. "I'm scared," she admitted to him that night, the humid Georgia air thick around her. "I know," he said. "I am too. I have not been afraid of anything in a very long time, Amara, because I stopped believing I had anything left worth losing. You are the first thing in 18 months I am afraid to lose." She flew back to Houston 2 days later. He was waiting at the airport, in the wheelchair he no longer tried to hide from her, flanked by the security detail that was now simply part of the truth of loving him, and when she walked through the arrivals gate and saw him there, she did not hesitate the way the old, guarded version of herself might have. She crossed the distance between them and folded herself into his arms, right there in the middle of the terminal, and felt him hold on to her with a grip that spoke of a man terrified she might disappear again. "I'm not running anymore," she told him, her face pressed against his shoulder. "But you have to let me all the way in." "No more secrets. No more secrets," he promised. The months that followed were not without difficulty. Loving a man like Kang Taemin meant learning to live with security details and safe houses, with the quiet, constant awareness that danger lived just outside the edges of their happiness. Meant Amara, cautious as ever, insisting on continuing her nursing work even as Taemin's world tried, gently but persistently, to pull her into a life of penthouses and private jets. It meant difficult conversations about his organization, about the parts of his world he was slowly, painfully working to legitimize now that he had someone worth building a different kind of future for. It also meant watching him fight, quietly and without complaint, to reclaim what the bullet had taken from him. The physical therapist he had rehired became a fixture in his life again, and though the doctors were careful never to promise a full recovery, something in Taemin's determination changed the moment Amara became the reason he was fighting. Slow, agonizing months of therapy brought back sensation in his legs that had been silent for a year and a half. It did not happen all at once, and it did not happen without setbacks that left him furious and exhausted and more than once ready to give up entirely. But Amara stayed through every one of those nights, the same way she had once stayed by hospital beds for strangers, because now the person in the bed was the man she loved. There was a night, nearly a year after the wrong number photographs that started it all, when Taemin called her into his physical therapy room in the penthouse, his face lit with something she had not seen in all their months together. Not triumph exactly, but disbelief, wonder, the particular light of a man who had stopped believing in miracles and found one anyway. He was standing, shaking, gripping the parallel bars with white-knuckled hands, sweat on his brow, but standing on legs that had been silent for 598 days. Amara did not remember crossing the room. She only remembered being in his arms, both of them trembling, both of them crying in a way neither had allowed themselves in years, and Taemin whispering into her hair that he did not know which miracle he was more grateful for, the use of his legs or the wrong number that had put her photograph and then her heart into his hands. He proposed on the banks of the Han River, the place he had once told her he loved to run before the bullet took that from him, on a morning 18 months after the day she first opened her apartment door to find him waiting on her doorstep. He was standing when he asked her, no wheelchair, no cane, just a man on steady legs holding a ring and a woman who had once guarded her heart so fiercely that even accidental intimacy had terrified her. "You were never supposed to have those photographs," Amara told him, laughing through tears as she said yes. "I sent them to the wrong man entirely." "No," Taemin said, pulling her close, his voice certain in a way it had not been in years before her. "You sent them to exactly the right one. It just took the universe a strange way of proving it to both of us." Their wedding, 6 months later, was small and fiercely guarded, held in a private garden overlooking the water he had once thought he'd never run beside again. Amara's mother wore her best geli and cried through the entire ceremony. Taemin's men, hardened soldiers who had spent years believing their boss incapable of softness, stood at the edges of the garden with expressions none of them could quite explain. And when Amara walked down the aisle toward a man who, 1 year earlier, had received a stranger's photograph by accident and let it crack open a heart he thought had died in a hail of gunfire, she understood at last what her father's proverbs had always tried to tell her, that sometimes the most painful mistakes carry inside them the exact door you didn't know you were looking for. She never did get an apology from Marcus. She never needed one. Some losses, she had learned, were only ever the beginning of something greater. If this story moved you even half as much as it moved us telling it, let us know by commenting your favorite part below. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications because we bring you a brand new story just like this one every single week. Thank you for staying with Amara and Taemin until the very end. We'll see you in the next story.